Good morning. Thank you for joining me. This is The Human Author, Episode 4. My name is Jen Cantwell, or JB Cantwell is my pen name. Today, I'm going to be working on Book 5 in my epic fantasy series called Light Chaser. If you would like to learn more about this series, you can check page at jbasandboycantwell.com. A couple of different things today. I want to remind you, anybody who's out there, that if you can't stick around for the whole hour, you can come back each day and just listen to the first 10 minutes to hear what I did the day before. And also, if you want to learn about what I'm doing here and why I'm doing it, you can visit thehumanauthor.com. A little housekeeping. There might be some background noise today. Hopefully it's not concrete being broken, but we have a bunch of work going on around us, and they're supposed to be quiet, but I'm not really holding my breath. Additionally, I would love to hear feedback from you, what you think about the live stream, anything that you want to share with me, or any questions that you have. You can email me at Jen, at thehumanauthor.com. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read yesterday's work so I can get myself and you back into the spirit of what I am doing. And then when I'm done, I will dictate live for about 50 minutes. Come to the end of my outline because for once I am using one. Okay, yesterday. Shame came to me in unexpected bursts as I imagined the light in my future. I knew that the head sorcerer of Eagleview, Zahn, had an immense pool of light of his own. He sent his pupils out into the world to gather it for him. I didn't pretend to know why he did this, other than the assumption that he was using it for himself. He was an old man, tall and thin and mean. He'd nearly killed me on my way out of Eagleview. Something I wouldn't soon forget. But he hadn't been able to kill me, surely embarrassing himself in front of the crowd that had gathered behind him to watch me leave. I hadn't looked back then, had kept going once our fight was over. It had been a blessing in disguise, for I'd come to the realization that I could protect myself, and being able to thwart a man like Zahn was tricky indeed. I wondered who was left there. Were my childhood friends still running around in that dirty market I'd left behind? I remembered Kenneth, a dark boy who'd frequently requested my kisses. Of course, he usually ended up on the ground, a curse given in lieu of a kiss. Was he there? Would he remember me? Would he recognize me? I wasn't sure. Would father, grandmother? My stomach sank as I thought of Regan and Brennan. Surely she would be able to see right through me. She'd been affected by the light in a way none of us had expected or understood. She'd been practically dead, but the light that pooled at the great horse keeper's feet had been enough to bring her back. She had a pool entirely different, entirely new, and downright ethereal. I wonder if she already knows. No, I wasn't sure about any of this, but I resolved to hide what I'd done. And if I needed to, I would stay away from her. Maybe she was gone already, beaten down by the lawmen of Eagleview. Regan was the biggest risk I would face when I finally arrived home. One thing at a time. I pulled out Oriana's map, the one she'd made for our trip that had never happened. It had many cities, kingdoms, and mountain ranges listed, but I was unable to bearings. I had ended up in a grass valley, but it wasn't on the map. Was I completely lost? I folded up the map after a few minutes of studying, then stood up and mounted Talon. Breakfast is over, I said to him. I grabbed for Glory's reins, and as the afternoon neared, we moved out. The farther away we went, the farther east, the more anxious I was to finally get there. I would deal with Regan when I met her, but would I need to kill her too? No, I couldn't kill everybody. No, my story would have to be watertight. The afternoon dragged on, and though I was eager to move faster, I wasn't able to handle much more than a trot, and in the chilly afternoon, steam rose from the horses' necks. I knew we couldn't go on like this indefinitely, so eventually I let them walk. On and on we went with nothing visible up ahead. But finally, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, I could see something in the distance. Was it a mountain? There were ranges on my map, but maybe this was the beginning of the soaring mountains that had eluded me. I picked up a trot again, and soon a gallop. I wanted to get there, wanted to find a place to hide for the night. I had had enough of being so exposed. I had so much to hide, so many stories that didn't make sense yet. But as I drew closer, I saw it wasn't a mountain at all, but a forest. As soon as I realized I was looking at trees, I pulled up on Talon's reins, pulled him to a complete stop. He was breathing heavily with glory, but I hadn't stopped for a break. I had stopped out of fear. I'd had many experiences with unknown forests in the past 6 months, and while I knew what to expect in the Kaya forest or even the Togue, this place was unknown. Both of those other places had had evil of their own. Would this forest be the same? I looked south, but all I could see was trees, and in the far distance, mountains. If they were the soaring mountains, I was at least a few days' ride away. As frightened as I was, I knew that traveling through them was harder than going through the forest, even if there were people within it who wanted me dead. Sometimes it seemed there were people everywhere who wanted me dead. So I urged Talon forward, Glory following reluctantly behind. Where did it go? Did she see something I didn't? Dogs could sense danger, I knew that, but could horses? Horses were known to shy at simple things. A boulder, a shoulder bag left on the side of the road, anything that looked unusual to their flighty eyes. Maybe this is just normal, I told myself, but I didn't believe it. After another hour of travel, we reached the first of the trees. I pulled up on the horses, listening carefully. The place looked friendly, and it did not have a tune like some of the other forests I'd been in. Those places had been enchanted, filled with danger and magic, two things that frequently went hand in hand. You can handle danger. You've proven that. But my most recent experience in an unknown forest had nearly been the death of me. I tried to push the memory of the Togue out of my mind, unwilling to remember my first meeting with Colm. I didn't want to remember just how helpless he had been in those first days. I didn't want to remember that he had simply been a man who'd always tried to help. So I pushed it down. It was in the past. I would figure out how to convince those around me that Colm's death had been nothing more than an accident. Or maybe I would tell them that we'd parted ways and leave it at that. I shook my head, trying to clear it, and squeezed Talon's sides. We entered the forest, and I kept watch, searching for any danger. But just like the surrounding lands, the trees were empty. I looked around at the ground as we walked through, but I didn't see anything, nothing alive. I wondered if somehow this place had stolen the lives of animals that might have lived there. I wouldn't let it steal. But as we walked along, shadows began playing with my mind. And soon I found myself jumping at every last beam of sunlight filtering through the trees, certain that someone was there following me. And then there was that telltale crack of a twig I had heard so many times in recent days. I whipped around, eager to meet the threat, to run it down and squash it beneath the hooves of the horses. But when I lit my hands in the growing darkness, I once again saw nothing. That didn't last, though, for up ahead was another of those shadows that had put me on edge. Only this one wasn't the shadow of a tree or a branch. It was the shadow of a boy. I moved closer to him, my body filled with fear and hope. Could it be him? I had lost Quinn to Torin months before, the young boy who had been my charge. He'd been taken from me, taken from the giantess Duna as well, and in those final moments within the Taram mountain, she had gripped onto his foot, flying away into as Torrent took them from us. I wondered if she was still alive. The boy began walking away. Wait, I called, urging Talon onward. Wait! Surprisingly, he stopped, and as Talon and Glory walked up to him, both snorting loudly, spooking, he turned. It's him. But was it really? And if so, why? I didn't trust what I was seeing, for here before me was a reminder of the great loss I'd felt when he was taken, of the great blame I'd felt, shame at having lost him at all. I jumped down from Talon's back, making sure to hold onto the reins. Slowly, I approached him, and soon I found that my eyes were not playing tricks on me at all. It was him. It was Quinn. How? Quinn, I said, is it really you? I bent down to look him in the eye, but I only saw a blank stare. I'd seen him look this way before, but for some reason it alarmed me now more than it had then. Maybe it was because I was alone, traveling without his big sister Iona, or maybe it was because of what I'd done to Colm. Would he know? No. But despite questions, I wrapped my arms around him, hugging him so tightly that when I stood up, his feet left the ground. I turned around with him, twirling him, joy unexpectedly filling me. With Colm's death, I'd convinced myself that I would never feel joy again. But here he was, alive and safe in my arms. Slowly, I put him back onto his feet and looked him in the eye. Quinn, what has happened? Where is Duna? Are you okay? He didn't answer any of these questions, and his gaze remained blank. As he stared right through me, my heart fell, but eyes slowly focused, and he looked into mine. Where is he? He asked in his smallest voice. Where's who? Quinn looked around, seemed confused to find himself in a forest. Where have you been? As he looked at me, tears began to pool in his eyes, then spilled onto his cheeks. I couldn't find you, I said. You disappeared. Where did he take you? When Nekenes had stolen the boy and brought him to Torin, his gaze had been blank then, too. But now he was looking seemingly unharmed. I knew, though, that harm could be much worse inside one's body and mind than it could ever be on the outside. Where is he? Is he here? His voice was so little, so frightened. Who? I asked. I looked around through the trees, but the darkness was coming so fast that I saw nothing else. We have to find him, he said. He told me to find him once I found you. He took my hand and pulled me away from the horses. I was so distracted that I dropped their reins and followed. Who are you looking for? I asked after a few minutes of him dragging me through the trees. For Master. My blood ran cold at these words. There was only one man I could think of who would have demanded that this boy call him a master. For everyone in Torrin's world obeyed him. He was the ultimate master. Suddenly, a flash in my mind distracted me, the image of Colm's face with my hands wrapped around his neck. My stomach tightened, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. Had I become as violent as that vile man? No, it couldn't be. I was just a girl, only 17 years of experience inside of me. Would I become as evil as Torrin was? Had I? I pulled back on Quinn's hand, turning him to face me. Why do you want to go to him? I asked. He took you from me, took Duna from me, and so many others. Why do we have to face him now? The truth was that despite all of the death and destruction that Torrin and his minions had created, I was terrified of meeting him myself. I'd beaten Zahn, but Torrin was an entirely new threat. I'd only ever seen him in my dreams, or maybe they had been visions. Why he didn't have his followers kill me, I didn't know. But I did know that the time was quickly approaching when I would be forced to face him myself. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I would ever be ready. And what will he do to you if you deliver me? It was then that Quinn wrenched his hand out of mine, turning to look through the trees once more. If I can't, he told me I must return and tell him. He said that, and there was the sound of a cracking twig. And this time, when I turned around, I was ready for a fight. There, not 10 feet away from me, was Torin, a wide smile upon his face. I took several steps backward, suddenly forgetting Quinn and all he represented. It was only a moment before I felt the strong desire to run, and I didn't care about Quinn, only about myself. But when I turned to run, I found that not only was Quinn gone, but both horses had disappeared as well. I barely realized this distracted I was by my terror. I ran flat out away from Torin, certain that if I'd stayed, it would be the end of me. What about Quinn? It didn't matter. The boy was gone again, and I had no choice but to flee. I ran, and soon my face and arms were scratched by the low hanging branches of the trees. In the distance, I heard laughter, and I felt certain it belonged to Torin. Torin, whom I'd only ever met in my dreams. Was this one of them too? Could I find comfort if only I could get wakened? I finally stopped running, slapping myself in the face again and again. Wake up! Wake up! I didn't wake up. Instead, I fell to my knees, desperate for relief from the stress, from the constant feeling of fear I'd been carrying with me ever since I'd met the tortoise keeper in those very first days of my journey away from Eagleview. I knew there was only one way to relieve it, only one way for me to extract myself from the traps Torrin set for me again and again. I would kill him, and it would mean so much more than Colm's death did. I would be celebrated, worshipped even. I would be forgiven for all of my wrongs. I stared around, exhausted and broken, searching for my pursuer, but he was nowhere, and I was left alone in the darkness with only my terrible memories to keep me company. All right, that was yesterday's work. It was a little smoother last night than the previous day's editing, so I'm feeling okay about it. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen for my dictation today. And here we are. So, oops, I lost my spot. The very beginning of chapter 3, I imagined the scene of what might await me upon my return to Eagleview. Would the people I'd left behind be saved? I slowly sat up, pushing myself backward until my back was up against a tree. Torin, had he been there? ? And what about Quinn? ? Both of them had disappeared so quickly, undo, that I had myself wondering if they'd ever been there at all, period. New line. I began to shiver as the night closed in, and I collected a few small stones and set them alight with fires, period. I held my hands out close to the flames, not worrying about burns, only worrying about calming myself, period. Was I losing my mind now that I was here in this forest? ? I forgot to set my timer. I hoped that Quinn would return, comma, that he would tell me that everything was okay, comma, that Duna was okay, comma, too, period. New line. As I watched the flames, comma, I couldn't help but be distracted by the fact that I was without any more cap light, period. In desperation, I opened my traveling pack, comma, brought out both canteens and opened them, comma, turning them upside down above my mouth, comma, hoping for a small sip, period. Anything, period. New line. But nothing came, period. New line. I wondered what would await me when I returned to Eagleview. Comma. And I wondered where I might find more light on my way home, period. There had been the horse back in the wildlands, comma, undo, in the wildlands, comma, full to the top with cap light, period. Would he still be there waiting for me, question mark. Would he be willing to share his magic with me, question mark. With tightness in my chest, comma, I remembered seeing the ram, period. That great cap keeper had had an enormous amount of light, but he'd refused to give it to us, period. My father, comma, unwilling to do as the ram said, comma, had submerged his arms in the cap light, comma, vials in his hand, period. I shuddered. Excuse me. As I remembered the seriousness of the burns he'd suffered, period. I'd tried to save him, comma, myself, period. Healing was one of the first things I'd ever learned to do, comma, though I had never been instructed, period. But that day, comma, when I tried to draw the poison, comma, I had failed, period. New line. Only those who stated that they would do everything they could to remove Torin from power were allowed to take light from the ram's pool, period. New line. My father was no warrior, comma, and he'd, period. But a few hours of pain had changed him. His mind, comma, had changed him entirely, period. He never put a hand on me again, comma, somehow convinced that his ways would not be tolerated in the future, period. New line. I took out my map and held it in the light of the fire, period. I had a vague idea of where I was, comma, though the trees were not listed on the map, period. Maybe before I went home to Eagleview, I could stop at the horse, period. I knew that going to the ram felt only in pain for me, period. But the horse, semicolon. He could fill my canteens and see me on my way, period. New line. No, period. You can't, period. New line. I knew this was true, period. Now that said, comma, part of me understood that I could never drink Cap Light again, period. New line. But another part of me desired it more than anything else, period. And that part was louder than the other, period. New line. I would have to take a detour, comma, go to the horse, and have my fill once again, period. New line. But now, comma, with no Cap Light, comma, I realized I was hungry, period. I hadn't eaten for days, comma, weeks, period. I pulled out a small package, stale bread from my pack, and took a bite, period. It was dry, comma, but I was able to get it down, period. It was then that I also realized my thirst was intense, period. I leaned over and put my hands over the ground, comma, pulling water from the earth, period. I leant over, undo. I put my lips to the little pool and drank greedily, period. New line. But as I did so, comma, I was forcefully reminded of how I'd ingested those last few sips of Cap Light. New line. Undo. Again, comma, a hunger like no other hit my belly, period. Surely the stuff would have put me right, period. But as I leaned, undo, I sat back against the tree again, chewing on another dry piece of the bread, comma. I began to feel a little bit more like myself again, period. New line. There is no Cap Light, period. You must stop, period. New line. And there's the noise. Just what I want when I'm dictating live. Sorry. It'll hopefully end soon. I looked around, comma, wondering if the horses might arrive once again, period. I wondered where they'd gone, comma, if Torin had been responsible for taking them away from me, period. At least they're not breaking concrete. I looked around through the trees, comma, the canopy thick above my head, period. This place was empty once again, comma, and for the first time I wondered if seeing Quinn and Torin had been nothing more than a vision, period. New Tears began to fall onto my cheeks, comma, and I brushed them away angrily, period. New line. Some warrior, period. New line. But I couldn't help it, period. I didn't want to be on this journey, comma, had never wanted to, period. For the first several weeks after meeting the tortoise, I'd refused the prophecy that I would be the one to kill Torin, period. What young woman would want such a thing, question mark. Still, comma, by the end of my travel through the wildlands, comma, I'd come to the conclusion that whether or not I liked it, it would be my fate to meet him in period. New line. I rolled over onto my side, comma, pressing my cheek into the cool ground, comma, looking for relief, period. And finally, comma, my stomach full and heart empty, comma, I slept, period. Page break, period. In my dreams, comma, I saw strange things, period. The enormous keeper, undo, cap keeper, fish I'd come across in the Cap Shadow Cap Mountains, period. Or had he been a fiend, period? Question mark. I didn't know at the time, comma. And seeing him floating through the air had been so alarming that I hadn't been willing to risk it for a few sips of cap light, period. I imagined him, comma, speaking to me, comma, but I couldn't understand his words, period. Maybe he had been good all along, period. I stood up, tall, on that mountain precipice and addressed him, period. New line, open quote. I need your help, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. I need cap light to get me through, period. Where is your pool? Question mark, close quote. New line. I heard the sound of a voice, his voice, comma, but it was nothing more than gibberish, period. New line, open quote. I don't understand, period. Can you speak more clearly? Question mark, close quote. New line. But the fish, comma, just as the visions of Quinn and Torin, comma, had done, comma, began to move away from me, period. He called back to me, comma, surely giving me some advice, comma, something I could use in the fight against Torin, period. But there was nothing to his words, period. New line. As I turned away and began to make myself undo, to climb that slippery mountain once more, comma, I slipped and my cheek hit the rock hard, period. New line. I awakened, comma, not on the mountain, trees, period. It had been so real, comma, looking for the counsel of a cap keeper I didn't trust, period. That was how desperate I had become, period. New line. I rolled over, comma, pushing my body closer to the fire as a chill ran through me, period. New line. Bree, comma, close quote. I heard a soft voice say, period. New line. I started, comma, leaping to my feet in a haze, comma, but ready to fight, period. New line. There, comma, standing before me was Akiris, period. He was the man who'd been responsible for the creation of Torin's book, comma, which I carried now, period. New line. Open quote. This time, comma, when a shiver ran through me, comma, it was for an entirely different reason than the cold. New line, open quote. What do you want? Question mark, close quote, I asked, period. New line, open quote. Undo. He smiled widely, comma, several broken teeth sticking out from his mouth, period. I didn't remember seeing him this way, semicolon. He looked ... broken, period. I wondered what had happened. Undo. What had become of his power, period. Then, comma, I remembered, semicolon. He was nothing more than a ghost, period. Line. Whether this was truth or not, comma, I wasn't sure, comma, but I had to believe it, period. New line, open quote. Give me the book you carry, comma, close quote, he said, comma, the smile falling away, period. Open quote. I long to see it again. Period. Close quote. New line. I crossed my arms, comma, unwilling, comma, and he took a couple of steps in my direction, period. He was an enormous man, comma, or had been one in life, period. Now, comma, he towered over me, comma, his words booming in my ears, period. Open quote. Open quote. It belongs to me, comma, close quote, he said, period. Open quote. I created it, comma, and it's mine, period. Close quote, new line, open quote. That's not what I've learned, comma, close quote, I said, period. Open quote. I've learned that this book belongs to another, comma, someone you probably know well, period. Close quote. I never undo. Open quote. I never should have given it to that boy, comma, close quote. Period, close quote. His voice was dangerous, comma, and not undo. And era, period. Open quote. Give it to me, period. Close quote, new line. From somewhere within me, I felt courage bubbling up. Period, open quote. No, period, close quote, new line. Then, comma, I was surprised, comma, for he approached me quick, comma, and while I thought he might have moved his ethereal vapor through my body, comma, instead I felt his hands upon my robes, period. He picked me up, comma, not unlike the way I Quinn, comma, but his intentions were much more serious than the boys had been, period. New line. Instead of twirling me around, comma, he threw me to the forest floor, period. A moment later, comma, he had my balance, comma, pulling the book from the deepest, most hidden part of it, period. New line. He dropped the bag to the ground, comma, opening the book, period. But when he looked at the pages, comma, his face became alarmed. Period. New line. Open quote. Where are they? Question mark. Close quote. he asked, comma, flipping through the book desperately, comma, searching, period. Open quote. This book was full of names the last time I saw it, period. Now it's empty, period. It's not possible, period. Close quote. New line. New line. Slowly, I pushed myself up to standing again, comma, but this time I kept my distance, period. The book, comma, while mine, comma, was of his creation, period. I didn't dare try to thwart him, period. Besides, comma, just like he said, comma, the pages were empty, period. I had come to understand that each name in the book had been crossed out, comma. The sorcerers they belonged to, long dead, period. My name had been the last one, comma. But the book was empty now. New line. He continued. To scour the pages, comma, searching for what, comma, I wasn't sure, period. Then, comma, with a most satisfied look on his face, comma, he seemed to what he was looking for, period. New line. He held out the open book to me, comma, making sure he didn't get too close, period. And there, comma, at the back of the book, comma, and amongst those many blank pages, comma, was my name, period. New line, open quote. What did you do? Question mark, close quote, I asked. Open quote. It was empty before, period. You changed it, period. How? Question mark, close quote. New line. He shrugged, comma, then smiled and put it inside his robes, period, as he floated there before me, comma. His body became less and less opaque, period. Soon, comma, I could see right through him to the trees beyond, period. He was disappearing, comma, and he was doing it with my property, period. New line, open quote. No, exclamation point, close quote, I said, comma, reaching for him, period. Open quote. Don't you dare leave me, period. I have for you, comma. You must stay, period. Close quote, new line. But despite my demanding tone, comma, he did not listen, period. Instead, comma, he laughed, comma, and turned away from me, period. As he began to float away, comma, I ran after him, period. I reached him, comma, too, comma, but when I lit my hands with fire, comma, and threw a curse at him, comma. Nothing happened, period. It wasn't like it had been with Colm, period. New line. Briefly, comma, I wondered how he'd, Akiris, had been able to touch me when I could not do so in return, period. Touch him. Open quote. Don't go, exclamation point, close quote. I called loudly, period. Open quote. You can't, M dash. You can't leave me here by myself. Period, close quote, new line. But he didn't listen, period. Instead, comma, his laughter rang out trees, comma, slowly quieting as he disappeared, period. New line. I fell to the earth, comma, frustrated and devastated at the same time, period. Was there no one who could help me? Question mark. I had an army at my command, comma, and yet I felt completely alone, period. This place was empty of life, comma. I was sure of that, comma. But it was not empty at all, period. It was filled instead with my worst fears, period. New line. I closed my eyes, giving up, comma. But sleep did not find me, period. Instead, comma, I lay there trying to rest, period. I wished I had the power of the cap light, comma, for it was always enough to keep me alert and strong, period. Cursing, comma. I wondered what might have happened to Akiris if I'd been undue. Light had been flowing through me, period. Period. New line. Undo. And what about Torin? Question mark. Or Quinn? Question mark. I'd been able to pick up Quinn's little body, period. Undo. Semicolon. Surely that meant that he had truly been here, period. New line. Suddenly, comma, I was filled with fear, comma, for while I was convinced that these trees were empty, comma. I couldn't deny the fact that both Quinn and Akiris had touched me, period. I sat up, comma, looking around, comma, searching for anyone else who might be here to try to thwart me, period. But there was no one, period. New line. I stayed like that for some time, comma, and gradually, somewhere outside the forest, the sun was coming up, period. I stood up, comma, pulling my bag onto my shoulders, comma, looking around for my horses, period. As I began to walk away from the trees, comma, they were nowhere, comma. And for a moment, comma, I considered going back the way I'd come, period. Surely I would find them again, comma, and I could leave this enchanted place behind, period. I understood now that traveling through the soaring cap mountains have been preferable, period. New line. But as I began the journey out of the trees, comma, I tripped over a root, comma, nearly hitting the ground, period. When I turned to see the blasted thing, comma, I saw instead something that made my heart leap, period. That feeling, comma, that joy, comma, of discovery, comma, was fleeting, comma, though, period. As I realized bent over and picked up the book, period. Akiris had left it behind. After all, period. I opened it, comma, searching through the pages to see if any new information had come to it, period. They were blank, comma. But then something caught my attention, comma, a particularly wrinkled page toward the back, period. I opened it, undo. I flipped to it, comma, and there was the one thing I'd hoped not to find, period. New line. My name, period. Right. That brings me to the end of my outline. It's kind of funny that I have one. It's pretty unusual for me, but I'm finding that it makes things easier here. So that's it for me for today. But like I said, I would love to hear feedback. So if you would please send me an email to Jen, Jen, at thehumanauthor.com. I would really appreciate it to let me know And if you have any questions, you can send them there too, and I will answer them tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.